Thank you all for joining Luxury Institute's webinar with Rishad Tobaccowala on Reinvented Marketing. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be shared after the session. The recording will also be available on Luxury Institute's website, YouTube channel, and podcast. Please share your questions using the Q&A box. We will address as many questions as possible during the last 10 minutes of the session. Now, I'd like to hand it over to Luxury Institute CEO and DataLucent Chairman, Milton Pedraza. Milton?
Thank you, Katie, and thank you, Rishad, for agreeing to be my interviewee. You and I met because we serve on a advisory board of Firework, and after I found out about you, because I have to admit I was ignorant, I started reading your writings, and I was fascinated. Fascinated, I think, is the right word. So we're going to go today through one of your main writings, Reinvented Marketing, and we're going to have a candid, myth-busting interview with you about the entire system that you've created, this framework. But first, I'd love for you to share, please, a little bit about your background, and very importantly, how you got to this point in your career where you are now, I think I can say, a guru, a sort of Peter Drucker character who for the modern age. So please.
Well, thank you. I think I'm neither a guru and definitely not within miles of Peter Drucker or anybody like him, but I grew up in India, got a degree in mathematics, then came to the University of Chicago for an MBA, started a career in advertising at the Leo Burnett Company, ended up in the course of 38 years remaining at the same company, though the last time my business card said Leo Burnett was 1995, because I helped launch one of the first interactive agencies for Leo Burnett called Giant Step, and then helped, along with other folks, take the media operations separate from Leo Burnett, the advertising agency. It was called Starcom. We then merged with another company, and in 2002, we were purchased by Publicis Groupe, which is the big French holding company. And I stayed there, and over the years, I built the case for digital and data and transformation along with others. And we purchased companies like Digitas and Razorfish, and more recently, Sapient and Epsilon. And so the company that I joined, 40 years ago had 1,500 employees. The company I stopped working at full-time 2 years ago had 80,000. That company was all in the United States. This company has 15,000 engineers in India. So it's a very different company. But along the way, for the last few years, I was I was helping out. I was called the chief strategist and chief growth officer of the group, working with the board and other individuals and other team members, and really thinking about the future, thinking about growth, thinking about talent. And I had wanted at a particular stage to start working for myself, not because I was not happy where I was, but because there comes a time when you want to do other things. I'm a senior advisor to that company, but my new career is really about how to help people think, see, and feel differently about growing themselves, their teams, and their business. And I do that in 3 different ways. I'm a company of one, so I'm my only employee. And I do that in 3 different ways. I do that through what I call my one-to-many channel, which is writing, which includes a book that has done very well called Restoring the Soul of Business, Staying Human in the Age of Data, through a Substack thought letter, which is free, called The Future Doesn't Fit in the Containers of the Past, where you first saw this particular piece of writing that we're going to discuss, and through other writing that I do for publications. I have a one-to-some model, which is really built around speaking, teaching, and running workshops. And then I have a one-to-one model, which is built around advising both large companies, private equity, and startups. The common theme among all of those is I supposedly offer cognition as a service, but what that really means is I help people see, think, feel differently about themselves, growing about themselves, their teams, and their business. So that's what I do. My stuff has, I've been more on my own and doing a lot of the more modern stuff more recently, and therefore I'm becoming a little better known, primarily because of my writing, as well as the fact that I'm not inside one company, and I work across a lot of different companies, and I come across, folks like yourself. My books, even though it's 18 months since it was published, it, probably it's selling about 1,500 to 2,000 copies every month, and it keeps increasing, which is kind of interesting. People thought it was published pre-COVID, but it is probably very true for a post-COVID world, so that's good. My Substack newsletter, which I started a year ago, has about 10,600 subscribers. But because of social media, pass along, reprinting, I have between 20 and 40,000 readers a week, which is kind of interesting. And because I have some 35,000 followers on LinkedIn, 20,000 on Twitter, but more importantly, my friends have big networks or people who like this, and they sort of spread it. So I've become like a small little media company of one, but a poor little media company, because outside of my book, which costs 14 or 15 bucks, all of that is free. And for me, it's a form of gift giving.
And Rishad, we were talking about the fact that you have hundreds of CEOs and thousands of C-levels, and then maybe tens of thousands also of younger executives who read your content and your, I would say, your musings.
Yes.
And your expertise. And so what I wanted to do today was, I was fascinated by the ABCDE of Reinvented Marketing. And I realized there were so many questions I had, and we just popped up the framework. I had so many questions I had for you. And because we serve on a common advisory board and we become good colleagues, I wanted to get you one-on-one. But then we thought, well, why should Milton be so selfish as to just ask Rishad questions one-on-one? How can we get you to curate a tour for us? And so I'll start off by saying something that you've said is that consumers today have godlike power. And I think that's a lot of what's driving your framework. So it's audience, it's brand, it's content, it's data, and it's enterprise. And underneath are three sub topics. So let's start with audience, or let's start with you framing it for us, and then we'll get into audience.
Yes? So the first is, for anyone in the audience, I have simplified. So this is not like the ultimate, doesn't cover every single thing, but the three things that have happened over the last decade, more than a decade, but let's say a decade, that I've lived through and I eventually found out was concerning for me. One was that people were not realizing that that marketing as we defined it was not something that we ever did until we had to start doing it about a decade and a half ago. So I learned my marketing book. I went to the University of Chicago when my book was imported from Northwestern, and there was a famous professor, Philip Kotler, and he basically said marketing is understanding and meeting customer requirements. And in my first 15, 20 years of working in advertising with leading clients, I realized that's not what we were doing. You could pretty much get successful marketing if you did three key things. You distributed through Walmart, you did proper couponing and shelf spacing, and you spent a lot on advertising. Okay, that's the way you built brands. So all of this thing, we weren't talking to anybody. That was basically it. But we began to have godlike power starting in 1993 with the World Wide Web. That grew even more significantly in 2007 when we had mobile and social. And continues to grow. So from 2007, 2008, we now had to listen to these people because there were two problems. One is they could speak to each other. The other is we no longer had price arbitrage. They could actually check prices in one store and check it on their mobile phone. They could talk about people. And so I went into boardrooms and I said, you all keep talking about how you're like empowering people. Now, unless I'm sitting at Google or Apple or a place like that, you're not full of it. All that you are doing is you're basically trying to align with people who are already empowered. You are empowering nobody. I don't understand why you're saying that. Okay. And so I said, let's toss it around and think about what marketing is. That was number one. But and so this is what this speaks to. The other one was, to a great extent, we began to confuse it because the world became so fragmented. There were so many different companies. There were so many different agencies. There were so many different subsections and clients that it became so confusing that nobody knew what to do. It became like crazy. And one of the things that if I have any superpower, it is the ability to see a lot of stuff and distill it down into core essences that people can talk about. Again, I try to simplify without dumbing down, but it obviously isn't the universal theory of everything, but it takes it down to its core. So I said, let me try to do that. And the third was I wanted to do it in a way that is easy to ingest. So along with this particular slide, which I'll take you all through, are 1,500 words. And so a lot of people said, people write books and they have conferences. And in 1,500 words with one chart, you've told me what I need to do.
Mhm.
I'm not saying here's the answer, but I'm saying here are things you want to think about and then go forth and prosper. And by the way, you just handed it to us and it's free, right? And so that was the third thing was I said, yeah, I'm eating my own dog food. The world has changed, right? You have to think about it in a different way. So that's what this chart is about, which is really simplifying without dumbing down, really letting people know the world of marketing has basically changed, and then actually showing how it can be done simply without confusing. So starting with audience, which is A for audience, and that's why it's ABCDE. Now, some people have basically said, what about precision? What about, things like that? So I said, fine, if you want, you can add F for finance and I can put some financial numbers, but forget that. Okay, it's ABCDE.
We'll take what you got right now. Right, so
it's A. So A. So the key things in audience that have changed over the last X number of years. We should think about people and not consumers. We should think about participants who are not passive. And we should think about reaggregation, not segmentation. So what do I mean by each of those? Very quickly. Everybody has always talked about the importance of consumer and the focus on consumers. It's called consumer goods marketing and all of that kind of thing, right? My belief is that's wrong. We should actually think about these people as people. The reason is when you think about people as consumers, you make three big mistakes. The first mistake is you look at somebody through the lens of your brand or the lens of your category. Very few people do that. Second is you begin to think about them narrowly as people who consume versus a broader perspective. And the third is because you are forced to define them as consumers and you look at them as consume, you also narrowly start to define your category. And what tends to basically happen is the threats and opportunities in the future never come from your category. So in effect, I say, now let's think about people. So what do I mean by this? Procter & Gamble, world-class company. They think about people, they don't think about consumers. Because if they thought about consumers, guess what they would understand? People's dirt removal habits. Because the P&G company is in the dirt removal business. That's all that they do. They remove dirt from your butt with Chaiman, from your kids' butts with Pampers, from your teeth with Crest, from your clothes with Tide, right? They're a dirt removal company. Do you define yourself through dirt removal? They would not know anything about people if it was that. So that's one example. BMW, Toyota, General Motors, they all thought they were in the automobile category. In 2010, all of them were surprised by Uber and Tesla that came from outside. Right? They defined themselves as people who moved metal and who basically made, carbon-based engines. That world has not gone, but it's moved. They missed it. And it took 10 years for them to figure out what was going on because they narrowly hire from each other, incestuously talk to each other, go to conferences with each other. So that was the thing. Mm-hmm. Participant, not passive, is very simply this, which is the three biggest shows in the United States are the Super Bowl, the Oscars, and anything that is, to do with another major sporting or like a major event. If you take all of the viewership of all of those, that is less than the interaction that Kylie Jenner has any particular 2 days with her Instagram followers.
Great.
Okay.
Jesus.
And so my basic belief is you need to get advocates, you need to get creators, and these people are not just sitting down. When you don't like a product or someone treats you badly on a Southwest Airlines plane, not South, it's more likely on a United Airlines plane, you basically will start tweeting about it and you're killing about it. I'm not sitting there like a cow that you send messages to and then, squeeze my udder for money. This is no longer the way. So that's second. And then the third one about reaggregation, not segmentation, is the biggest shift in the way marketing gets done is this. And it's both. But the way I grew up with marketing, my first 2 decades is we would take large audiences and make them into small audiences. Because you take network television and you say, well, I'm going to go to cable. I don't want National Geographic or TV Guide. I want Sunset Magazine. That's what you do. Okay. So higher concentration of the type of people you want to look for, whether it's demographic, psychographic. One day I went many years ago when Yahoo was very big. And I sat down there with, Jerry Yang and a couple of other people and said, why are you telling me you've got all these millions of people on your homepage? They said, yes, we do. So I said, okay, let's do a little bit of math. Can you answer me 2 questions? Number one is, if I wanted to buy everybody, how much would it cost me? And can you give me a decile analysis of who comes? So they said, what are you talking about decile? I said, I want to know how many people come 10 times or more, 9 times or more. Just give me the thing. And I showed them that if I wanted to reach that audience, but because of the concentration of the same people coming again and again, I would have to pay 5 times for a takeover. I have to pay 5 times what my clients would pay for a Super Bowl ad. Okay. And I said, your economics are wrong. That's not the way for you to think about it. You don't want to sell this. You want to sell something different. You want to sell audiences of one. So instead of starting with a cow and hacking it to get a steak, you want to start with a piece of mince, but get enough pieces of mince for a hamburger. Right. And I basically said that today is called search engine marketing. And they kept doing this crappy shit, and they gave their search engine marketing to Google. Right. And so my whole stuff is, there was a case of massive value destruction, not understanding. Nobody comes to social media, digital media, commerce media. Everybody's one at a time. You reaggregate, and the reaggregating skills are very different than segmenting skills. And so you need to combine both of those. So when you tell somebody, forget about consumers, forget about audience, and forget about segmentation, and that's just with audience, they wake up. And I said, why are you doing it like this? Okay. And not that everybody does it like that. A lot of people do the modern stuff, but it's like, this is what it means. So that's audience.
So let me ask you a question. Marketers, I grew up at Colgate, Pepsi, even Citibank, thinking customer segments. And now we still think of customer segments, audiences, right? That we target, right?
Yeah.
Military term. So what is the role of the customer segment in what you just described as audience?
So if you think about people and you say, okay, I've got these people who care about this, people care about this, and you segment them on that, then the idea also is you may not need to target them, because targeting is somewhat old school. It's like basically taking a spear with a stick and a piece of metal and throwing it one at a time at people. Instead, what I basically say is, what do these people particularly like? And I would take a spear and I would impale it with a piece of meat and let people come and impale themselves upon it. Okay. Which right. So it's a different model. It's a new thing. And so the whole idea is, how can I help somebody? Right. I always tell folks, I don't care what your stupid advertising and communication and messaging is. It's total bullshit. Who cares about that? Right. In fact, even though I worked for many years in advertising, and I still do, my own stuff is like, advertising in secular decline. Forget about it. Okay. Because in effect, what you're trying to deliver is what I call SAVE, a solution or accessibility or value or values or an experience. And that is why that's the segue into like brands.
Okay, but before that, that's a lot of blasphemy in one segment. Okay,
yeah.
So how do people react? How are marketers reacting to this? I mean, there's a lot of, look, so I engage with brands every day.
All right, so all I can tell you is this little thing was written about 6 weeks ago. And the best I can tell, it's been read that I can measure, besides what's been sent inside organizations, right? 150,000 times. At least 10 large organizations have asked me to train their folks on this.
Okay.
These are packaged goods. And they're sending it in and it says, wait, this makes so much sense. And obviously I say it with a little bit of humor, and I obviously have lived through all of this, and I happen to know marketing. After 40 years, I've learned something. Right. So the whole idea is, I say, hey, here's what the change is. I'm not saying that consumers suck, but I said, if you think about people, it's a better way of selling, right? Et cetera, et cetera. So their whole stuff is, this is so cool. And you speak in English and we know what to do. And you aren't basically talking in jingo, and you're not trying to sell us conferences, and you're not trying to basically sell us 5,000 years of Forrester reports, right? And my whole stuff is, why are you needing that? Why do you need all of that? You're not smart enough. So all I'm basically reminding people is marketer or leader or student, you're really good. Why don't you just unleash your potential versus hiding through gibberish?
Fascinating. Okay, so audience, now brand. Now audiences, brands, relationships. Tell us more about that.
Okay, so there are lots of important things. So the first thing is you could ask a seminal question, which is, do brands matter? Right? There are some people, Professor Galloway once in a while says brands don't matter. And my whole thing is like, that's not true because he's building a brand for himself.
That's exactly right. He's a creative.
I mean, come on, Galloway, don't shit me. Okay, so the whole idea is brands remain the ultimate navigation devices in a world of fragmentation. That's number one. Number two, if you look at interbrand, the value of brands keep thing. Yeah. What he is correct about is not that brands matter or brands don't matter, but the way brands are built are different today than they were before. He's completely correct about that. So brands matter, but the way they're built is different. And in that, there are three key things that are now becoming more important. Again, I'm not saying what we do and what we've done isn't important, but there are three things that are becoming far more important than what we've done. And because they're new, we should pay attention to it. So first, not surprisingly, is if you have a great experience with a brand, that is worth 1,000 GRPs of television advertising. So one of the key things I suggest to people is, can you invest your money in better products, better services, better design? Mm-hmm. Because that is more likely to build your brand than telling people about how cool it is.
And you talk about Amazon as an example.
So like Amazon, basically, our friend, Mr. Bezos basically said, there are some companies that spend 30% of their time improving their product and 70% of their time telling everybody about it, and others who spend 70% improving their product and 30% telling about it. So 70-30 is what you want to do. You spend most of your money in better service, etc. That's one.
Because word will spread. Is that the point? Because word will spread organically.
Yes, because of these people who are participants and not passive, right? Mm-hmm. They will tell people. They will spread the word. As it goes through, you'll get high, net promoter scores, etc. All of that is what experiences do. That's number one. Okay. The second one is purpose-driven. And why purpose-driven is, there are two reasons for purpose-driven. Is people, remember, I said, don't think about people as consumers. I would say people, if you want a word besides people, I would say, think about them as citizens. Okay. So a citizen has lots of interesting things. A citizen consumes, but a citizen also cares about what's going on in their neighborhood. A citizen cares about government, hopefully. Citizens care. So if that is true, what people are now asking is, in a world where you have ESG, DEI, right, and all the challenges we have from globalization and climate change and everything else, right, people are asking, what does your company stand for? Okay. There's absolutely no doubt that there are world-class companies that make a lot of money, but people basically say, are they purpose-driven companies? And the reason why purpose-driven is important is because many people, and it's not just young people, are basically saying, do we want to fund a company that does this, right, or does that? And so by basically saying we are purpose-driven, and there are many companies that do that, that becomes important. And then the third one is the thing called employee joy. Now, one of the other reasons why purpose-driven is important, which ties into employee joy, is young people especially ask if they want to feel proud about the company they're in. Mm-hmm. And so the purpose-driven companies allow better attraction of employees. But employee joy is my new thing, which is another thing that a lot of people are beginning to realize how important it is who creates the brand? Right. So let's say the brand is built on experiences. If you've got happy employees, you're likely to have better experiences. Let's say your brand is built on better design. Well, happy employees are likely to be more innovative. Right. And so why not fixate on employees versus fixating on consumers? So my belief is I'm less interested in your net promoter score among your consumers. I'm more interested in your net advocacy scores among your employees. Because happy employees make a very big difference, and they create the experiences. So those are all.
Let me ask you, Two questions. Number one, can every company be purpose-driven? I mean, there are companies that are producing or delivering products and services that we might not find very relevant to society. Can those companies be purpose-driven too?
I believe every company can be purpose-driven because they can define what their purpose is, right?
Okay.
And what I mean by that is if their purpose should, and most companies have multiple purposes and not one purpose, right? So most companies should have a purpose of ensuring that everybody keeps their job and they make money. So, profit is
economic viability.
Economic viability, all of that
Right.
happens to be one thing. Another would be, we strongly believe in certain things that we want to give back to our community, and we care about these particular things. There are companies who care about, minorities. There are people who basically care about the environment, right? And then they say part of what we're doing is we believe we need to give back more. We need to be a more sustainable company, like a Unilever, right? So Unilever makes products, and for many years, Unilever managed to do both things, sustainability and profits, and now is having a little issue, right? But you can do that. And other companies, it is really their purpose that gives them the privilege, a Patagonia or something like that. But every company can have a purpose. It doesn't have to be a higher level purpose. It can be, we care about our neighborhood and we care about our community, and we want to make sure that we share some of our stuff with, it's basically reminding people that you as a company, I don't use multi-stakeholders, but you as a company can only succeed in the middle and long run if you also care about what's around you and not just about you.
Okay, now think of a company that has 20,000 employees. Let's say that most of them are salespeople in a retail store. Should we empower those employees to riff on social media, to live stream? Is that a way to empower people? Because that's, freedom. Or the company says, look, that's not brand appropriate. I have to control these people. How much freedom do you give employees in order to create employee joy and relevance and meaningfulness?
Okay, so in this case, I'm going to be a little bit revolutionary and take an extreme position, which a lot of people might think is not right, which is perfectly fine. I don't believe I belong and I'm owned by a company. And I don't believe, and this is one of the reasons why everybody wants people to come back to work, because bosses have begun to realize that they don't own us. Okay. I believe that a person has all the free rights and the company doesn't give it to them. All that a company does is it basically says, we would like to suppress certain things that you have in return for other things we give you. And it is your choice to decide whether you want to accept that or not. So if in this 20,000 person company, if that 20,000 person company is a retailer that basically sells hamburgers, okay, you would basically tell folks, hey, listen, we strongly recommend that when you're at work, you don't live stream what's going on in the kitchen, not because what we're doing in the kitchen is bad, but it's a safety hazard, and we don't want people looking into kitchens every time. And even if you've got the cleanest kitchen, sometimes when you're washing things, it doesn't look that clean.
Okay.
We're giving you a pay wage. This is not going to help us. If on the other hand, we're basically poisoning people, go videotape it. Okay. But in effect, what you basically say is, you have all the rights. We're asking you to suppress some of your rights from the outside world. In this world, and in return, by the way, you get compensation and you get job and you get everything else. If you don't want these, then do what you want. But the whole idea is, it's not I'm giving you permission. I am giving you something to take away certain things. You already have permission. So my basic bias is much more to, which is why if you have happy employees, right, they are likely to promote you and say good things about you. And the reality of it is the balance of power has so much shifted from, look, until the Squid thing came out on Netflix, the last 3 #1 shows, or in their top 3, were shows created by TikTok people who made themselves famous on TikTok, who got this deal without CAA or ICM or any of these people. So my whole stuff is all these people gathered in boardrooms thinking that they control stuff. I said, give me a break. Your velvet rope is your roping yourself in. There's a world outside. People are detouring around you. You're a disease that people are deteriorating around you. Has anyone told you how stupid you all are?
Okay,
And this
that's
is why
a great segue.
and this is why I fly from city to city now into boardrooms. And of course, I do it with a little bit more, without this stupid thing, because they'll kick me out, but with a little bit more. A combination of humor and deference, okay? But at the end of it, my whole stuff is like, give me a clue, people. What are you thinking about?
Okay, that leads to content perfectly. That's a great segue into content, because you're talking about the creator economy, the freedom to create. TikTok, it blossoms into some powerful hit. So tell us about poetry versus plumbing.
All right, so content is important. And content is everything from what you put on a catalog to the way you design a store to what you say. It's everything. And I am a little bit concerned. And again, for those who may not have heard, I have an advanced degree in mathematics, I have an MBA in finance, and I have some understanding of data. Not too much, but enough. Okay, so I'm not an anti-math or anti-data person under any circumstance. But I think our entire industry has become fixated on plumbing, which is how do you reach the right person at the right time in the right place? Mm-hmm. We have forgotten that once we do that, they don't get nourished by the plumbing, they get nourished by the beverage we put in the pipes. And that is the poetry, which is a combination of an interaction, creativity, solutions, values. We truly believe now, for many more companies, I say, like, why is this all about math and engineering? Why? So that's the poetry versus plumbing. Okay. So that's one. And the second one is respond, not just create. When I grew up in the ad world, 95% of my work was done until we released the ad in the world. It was a television ad, radio ad. 95% of my work was done. The other 5% was afterwards, a little bit of stuff. In this world, 95% of the work you have to do, or not 90%, maybe 70% of the work you have to do is after you put your interaction out. Because people are constantly saying, okay, here's what I think about your ad. Here's what I think about your product. Here's what I think about your service. As importantly, people can start campaigns about your product and service without you, right? And without you. And so you basically sit there and say, what the hell happened? And so the whole idea is, when we have our campaign calendar and our campaign, burn the goddamn thing. There's no campaign calendar anymore. Like, okay, that's nice to you have some idea of where the world is going. That's not the way it works. So that's what response, not just create. And the last thing about move hearts, not minds, is quickly in ending on this end, is I think we are forgetting something, that we are living in we're living in a data-driven, digital, silicon-based world, fine. But the people who buy your products and services are analog, carbon-based feeling people. We choose with our hearts and we use numbers to justify what we just did.
Yes, emotional intelligence, inspiration, right? Inspire, not perspire.
It's that. And by the way, if everything was on ROI basis we're all doing this through that, nobody would have children.
They are expensive and they are emotionally challenging. You worry about them all the time, right?
Nobody would have children. Nobody would drive BMWs and Mercedes. Nobody would wear Rolex watches. Come on, people. People aren't like this. They're not like this. Even the economists, after all these years, have realized we're not that rational.
Oh, totally. Okay, it's like, is it think fast and slow, et cetera, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so now let's get to data. One of my favorite topics. You know that I'm an investor in personal data rights,
yes,
personal data equality, and I get a lot of support and I get some pushback. And so let's talk about data, and maybe we'll share a few maybe differences of opinion. I don't think so ultimately, but tell us about quality over quantity. Okay,
so and obviously everything on this chart, I purposely want to be provocative, so I'm not saying that
of course
the other part of it doesn't matter. But in the world of data, my understanding and my belief is that data is critically important for the future, and it's like electricity. You can't operate without it, and it illuminates the way ahead. On the other hand, I basically remind people that once we went from the steam age to the electric age, very few companies differentiate themselves on the way they use electricity. Okay. And so one of the things, and a lot of people are constantly talking about how much data they have. And so I often make this thing, your data lakes are filled with dead fish, okay? Because they talk about all the stuff they got. And I said, how much of this is like actually relevant to where we are? So let's think about quality over quantity, because sometimes the signal gets lost in the noise, and the noise is how much you got. People keep talking about terabytes of this, and we got billions of these and millions of these and arrays of this. And I said, okay, what does that mean? The second is two things. One is, as you know, most of the data in today is most of the data we have has been created in the last couple of years. And more because of everything from mobile to social to signals to we're getting constant stuff. That in many ways, a lot of the historical data, and this is probably where we'll have a debate, a lot of the historical data is increasingly irrelevant, and the real-time data is more important. And you have more and more real-time data. And so I said, let's focus on that versus something that you have 5 years ago or 7 years ago. And the third one is, okay, you got the data. Let me make this very simple thing. By April of 2020, the President of the United States, the President of the United Kingdom, and the leader of Brazil, or the Prime Minister of the UK, the President of Brazil, and the President of the United States, and the Chancellor of Germany, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, and the Premier of South Korea all had exactly the same information and the same data on COVID. How come they reacted completely differently? And my basic belief is it's because of the meaning they extracted from the math. And when anybody basically tells me it's the math, it's just like the whistleblower basically said, people write the algorithms. It's the algorithms. It's the way you write the algorithms, right? So my stuff is, how do you extract meaning from math? Don't tell me you got the data, because I can put different people in the room and they will extract different things from the same data. So that's what I'm talking about, meaning versus math.
Okay, so let me ask you a couple of questions. One, I do believe that quantity matters. And the reason I say that is because very often people who are data scientists or marketers, they want to look for the signal, the clear signal in the data, for example, that triggers the prediction to the transaction. However, there is a tremendous amount of data, and I believe that there's discovery of insight and of potential innovation. So you have to look at all the data, because the obvious data sometimes doesn't lead to any innovation. But the data that is hidden, that has hidden insight, we need to analyze that. And that's how sometimes we get great innovation.
I agree with you. And in fact, one of the key things that in this idea of data and things like that, I'm just going to remind myself, because sometimes I forget when I myself have written. So in my book, right, my opening chapter is called Too Much Math, Too Little Meaning. Okay. And in there, one of the things I say is, here are the 6 eyes that you want to basically have to do with data. One is obviously including different people, so you have different points of view, and then interrogating the data. But then the other ones really is to absolutely make sure that you have all of it that you require for what needs to be done, and you aren't missing some key stuff. So that is to your point.
Yes, yes. So the other part that I might not agree with you is that data is a commodity like electricity. Electricity is something that's a very common substance, right? A common power. It is a commodity. It's similar everywhere. And great inventions came out of it that we could never imagine from electricity, but it's still electricity. Whereas this data is the data of a human being. And therefore, it is unique to each human being. And that's why I see the power of the data to be able to personalize, because your data is different from mine. Yes. Our data combined, my Google, my Facebook, my Instagram data is a unique, and that's why we call it a copyrightable asset, because it is a compilation of a life that is unique. And by the way, just to finish the thought, what I have done throughout my life, these patterns of my life, very often repeat themselves. Humans are creatures of habit. So I wouldn't want to only go real time and miss out on the wonderful patterns that humans have. Some of them are a little crazy, but to be able to serve you better, and maybe even to give you insight about yourself that you may not realize.
Yes, so I will agree half of what you've said, and then I will question half of it. I agree that we are slow to change. And so obviously some historical stuff, all of that makes sense. I also believe that each person is absolutely unique. In fact, we don't have one identity. We have many identities, which is what I basically
Totally
said.
agree. Very situational.
And all of that is true. But what I suggest to people is the data that most people have collected. Unless you're like a Google and Amazon or a few other places, most of the data you've collected, your competitor has the same data. Okay, you're not going to differentiate on the data. You're going to differentiate on how you use the data.
That I totally agree.
And what people. One day I walked in many years ago, but not so many years ago that it should be so shocking. And I explained to a board how buying media from NBC was different than buying media from Google. Okay. And I said, they're completely different. So he says, what do you mean? I said, you grew up when you were buying media from NBC. And so NBC, ABC, CBS, all basically bid for your business. I said, you bid against your competitors for the pleasure of Google's business. Mm-hmm. And the fact that their rates keep going up tells me that you don't have differentiated data.
Okay, so now imagine that I, as a consumer, it's not imagination anymore. We have exchanges. I can download my data, my Google data, my Facebook data, my Instagram data. It's my original compilation. It's my asset. And I can license it to BMW, Mercedes, Volvo, Subaru. They all want to have somebody like me as a consumer.
Yep.
They're all going to use the data differently, and they're going to interpret it differently, and they're going to come up with different value propositions, right?
Yeah. But see, what you're doing is what we need to do more of, which is what DataLucent and others are doing, which I've always basically believed, is our value, what we're doing is we're trading our time and someone else is monetizing it. Okay?
True.
And what is tending to basically happen is you could say, hey, I'm giving you the benefits of the work. I'm giving you benefits of searching for stuff. And that's an amazing godlike power. And who the hell cares whether I'm not paying you anything, but I'm extracting every dollar of you from selling you. My whole thing was increasingly more and more, why can't I decide that? Which is what DataLucent and others are doing. And increasingly based on the events of the last 2 to 3 years, I believe more and more countries, more and more companies are beginning to think about it, that I want to control my stuff and I want to decide how it gets shared. Because one of the areas that I'm particularly concerned about is that privacy as defined by people in Silicon Valley who have the imagination of amazement, but the intellectual capital that's extraordinary, but the emotional and wisdom of a toilet bowl, right? But then, okay, to sort of decide what this is, because I will say something that I I heard from Gerald Greenwald, the journalist, and he had a line which I've never forgotten, which is, "You are not who you are when somebody is watching."
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
So I believe that privacy is a human right, and it Absolutely. Is not for Silicon Valley to decide whether I have it. I have it. Absolutely. I would rather destroy you companies than take it. And that's the modern thing that we have to deal with.
Yes. I believe someday Facebook will be paying me for my data. I'll pay them the $5 a month.
Yes.
But they'll be paying me for my data if they want it, and only select data that doesn't give away the things that I consider private.
And there are more and more companies, including, I forget the name of the company, that the person who ran search at Google, Sridhar, whatever, has started a company, a search company, which is actually completely ad-free.
Right? I forget what it's called, but so now let's talk enterprise, because I know we're running out of time, and I would love to do this for an hour and a half, but enterprise, tell me about schizophrenia, not paranoia, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, so the first thing is, and this particular box, I've had 2 or 3 people, more than 2 or 3 people push back. People who have relatives with either of these diseases saying I'm demeaning diseases by putting in here. So let me tell you why I use these words. A very famous book by a very, very famous person, Andy Grove of Intel, was called Only the Paranoid Will Survive. So this is a juxtaposition with that. It's not a comment on diseases, okay, which are both serious. But paranoia is basically what companies think about, because I've got to be paranoid about my competition. I got to be paranoid. We're living in fear. We're living in a connected world. A paranoid means you become a porcupine or a skunk and nobody comes near you. Also, you can be paranoid, but nobody comes near you. There is a reason why Intel has missed every single thing over the last 5 years. Last 10 years, last 15 years. They missed mobile, they missed cloud, they missed everything, right? Paranoia. They should be connected and open.
So they failed to collaborate with others.
They fail to collaborate. They fail to connect. They fail to be incestuous to their Intel, hegemony. It's very interesting. Balmer couldn't figure it out, but obviously Satya Nadella came and got them free of that nonsense. Okay.
Thank God.
So his thing was very different. The reason I say schizophrenia, not paranoia, is we have to run two business models simultaneously. We need to run a business model for today so we can keep our shareholders happy, pay our employees, and remain in our jobs. But at the same stage, we need to sometimes run a model that blows up and completely destroys our current model. So that's what I mean by a schizophrenic model. And if you look at successful companies, they actually eat their young, right? Netflix streaming versus Netflix. Apple iPhone destroyed iPod. iPod was basically how they came back with iPod and iTunes, right? So I basically say, don't do half-baked shit. You have an innovation team spending 20% of their time, or this person is just, take your best people, or at least a third of your best people, put them to tomorrow and say, go do something that'll create stuff, even if you've got to destroy us. Okay, that's what you want to do, reporting up to the CEO versus all this. We have an innovation group and we have an imagination group. What is that?
It's a hobby, right? It's a hobby for them. Yeah. Okay, that's clear. Diverse, fear-free culture. Right.
So here's a key. We are living today in a world where on paper, we are supposed to have freer enterprises and freer stuff, because people have begun to realize that racism is terrible, sexism is horrible, any kind of stuff is terrible, and so we have ESG, we have DEI, we've got a whole bunch of other stuff. What has happened, unfortunately, is often, while all of those are amazingly important, they've also stopped letting people speak. Okay, because you don't know if you disagree with someone's idea, whether they think it's a microaggression. Okay.
That's true. That's true.
People won't provide feedback because their whole stuff is, I don't want to be dragged in the front of an office. So as a result, for what we've turned out to be really, really good is we now have what I call diversity of faces without diversity of voices.
That's an interesting point, because, a lot of people don't know I'm Hispanic.
Right.
And they will make certain comments to me that they wouldn't to a Hispanic, but I want to hear honesty. Of course, I want to hear it.
Yeah.
With kindness,
but here's a very big difference. Here's the key. My thing is, if someone basically, insults somebody on their race or sex or harasses them, they should be hauled out of the goddamn company, right? But when people criticize me, which they criticize me often, if I look at everything I basically say he's insulting me because I'm a short brown Indian versus he's insulting me because I'm stupid, right? Are two different ways of looking at it.
Yes.
Right. And you want an environment where you basically think that people are actually of good intent, and sometimes they may in their comment. And that's why, unless you can't have innovation, you can't have amazing stuff, and you can't have true diversity unless the people who you've brought in on the board also have a voice. Right, both the people who are existing, but everyone of color, and sometimes I see them, but they don't have a voice. And then other people don't have a voice because if you protest on something, it's like you don't get it. And so, therefore, my belief is we must have the ability to speak and be respectful, and obviously no sexism or any of that.
Right, I agree, and I do believe that minorities who become majorities cannot do to the new minorities what was done to them. We have to bring everybody with us.
It's everybody's, and it's on everything. It's not just that, but the whole idea is the other part of diverse free culture has got nothing to do with ethnicity, nothing to do with women, all of which we have to do, and I'm 100%, more than 100% believe in it. But here's what I believe. The biggest challenge really is even not that, it's senior management not listening to warning signals because people fear them. So one of the chapters in my book, and I've also written on my Substack, is called The Turd on the Table. How many times in the days when we used to come to the office, we would sit around a table and everybody knew that that little thing that we were discussing that looked like a brown, moist thing was not a brownie, but a piece of shit, but nobody would call it out. Okay.
Totally.
And you see, where the Boeing went under or not, got into trouble, Wells Fargo had issues. People knew there was a problem, but management did not have a diverse, fear-free culture, and the company got destroyed or got badly hurt. And so my whole stuff is you have to be willing to have an environment where people can speak up, especially to truth to power, because it's really good for the company. And that's part of marketing. And the last thing really is trust is speed.
That's my favorite. I got to tell you, that's my favorite. So give us a few examples of that.
Sure.
And then we'll end with a couple of companies that might be doing this.
So very quickly, trust is speed. So you know that when you have a relationship with anybody that's a good relationship, if you want to convince them about something, you have a conversation. And if they say yes or no, and then they'll say, I want you to provide some supporting evidence later of this, right? So when I would go to my bosses and I would make a recommendation, I would not take a deck in. I would not take a whole bunch of stuff. I might take a piece of paper and I'd say, I've been thinking about something and I think we want to think about things like this. Okay. And they didn't say, write me 500 pages before we have a conversation. They said, we know you, you know me. We know you've got a good thing for the company. We know also you're insane once in a while. Okay. So with that being said, that's a pretty good idea, but I now need you to do this to support that idea. Or once in a while, they'd say like, have you drunk too much? Get the hell out of my office. Okay. But the reality of it is trust is so important, including by a brand, because brands eventually are trust marks, right? Companies get destroyed because people, it really stops their future. So I'll give you an idea. The likelihood of Facebook becoming your metaverse company is zero. Okay. Because if I can't trust you with a society operating system, I'm not going to trust you with my life operating system. Okay. It's got nothing to do with technology. It's got nothing to do with you want to own all the virtual reality. This is why these people are so badly informed. They really believe in themselves. They don't believe in wisdom.
Well, I'll give you two examples. So we just came up with an index that measures the percentage of consumers who are willing to license their data, to digital data, to brands, right? So trust is speed. To the degree that I can beat my competitor in being able to license your data because you trust me, of course, I need to give you, some guarantees, and it can't be, trust me, I need to verify that trust. But to the degree that I can earn your trust and verify it, I can get a lot better quality data, more data than anybody else. That would be one example.
Absolutely. And the way you can build trust, by the way, besides being around for a long time and people kicking your tires around, there's a faster ways also of doing it. One of them is making your intent clear. What are you trying to do? So I don't have to guess. Okay, what are you trying to do? Number one. Number two is being transparent about how you're trying to do it.
Right.
Okay, this is what I'm trying to do. This is how I'm trying to do it. And by the way, these are the data points I'm using to do it. Okay.
Yes.
If you do that, then people can basically say, no one is spending time saying, okay, what is Rishad up to? What's he doing? And how's he doing it? I said, this is how I'm doing it. That allows them to say, why are you doing this shit? Or why are you doing it this way? Or this is the wrong data points. But then there's trust. And my belief is we have forgotten the emotional value of data, and we've only remembered the mathematical value of data.
Fair point. So I'm going to end with that, except for one more thing. Give me an example of a company that you think is as close to living this framework as possible right now, because it's new.
Yeah, so all of these are high, these are not ideal, but I'll give you three companies that I believe are living it and have lived it and continue to live it. So a company that has lived it, I think, through its entire life is Southwest Airlines. Okay. A company that has morphed into it from a bad decade is Microsoft under Satya Nadella.
Oh, interesting. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
A company that has its ups and downs, but is more in this than not is Nike.
Okay.
Right. And in your area, a company that I admire, but you can talk more about, is a Gucci.
Yes. And I will tell you that Marco Bizzarri and also François Pinault, the head of Kering, are excellent human beings. Okay, when Francopino walks into a Gucci store or a Saint Laurent store, no one has fear. They're thrilled that he came in because he's not a pontiff, he's a human being. The other thing with Marco Bizzarri is that he inspires people, doesn't perspire people. And they have opened the company to lots of collaborations that now everybody's copying. I think the other piece is that they empowered the employees, right? They opened up the system not only with creative, where they bring in all sorts of creatives, but they've opened up the system so that their employees can be the best human beings they can be. I was there in 2015 with Katie when they were transforming. We helped with a lot of those projects, but I can tell you that they transformed into this complex adaptive system as opposed to being a fortress. And I'll stop there because I want you to have the last word. Tell us how you would sum up this framework and how can we adopt it? Because
Sure.
change is not easy.
So I would basically sum up this framework by saying it's a simple way of thinking about how you do marketing. And all of us are marketers, even if we have to sell ourselves to our partners. Mm-hmm. It's not the be all and end all. As we can have conversations. You all can decide this box makes no sense, add more boxes. You might want to add letters. But it's an easy way to guide yourself in a complicated world. That's number one. And it basically says, here are things you want to think about. And it doesn't say this is the way, but it says, these are ways to think about that'll get you to a better place. And a way to, continue, if you want to read about the words that went in this and other stuff that I write about marketing, I've just put my rishad.substack.com, which is my free thought letter, and it's completely free. And if for some strange reason you don't want to put your email in there, you can read the stuff without putting your email. And if you decide you don't want to read it on that, go to my website and look at blog, and it's all there. There's no upselling, no affiliate marketing, no data harvesting, but you might find it interesting.
Rishad, thank you. I think we're all grateful. Every comment I'm getting here is how great your insights have been. Love it. Yeah, it's just really incredible. This is awesome.
Well, thank you for having me, and for all the people who dialed in to listen to this. Thank you.